It's about money. Are you saving it? What are you doing with it? We're going to talk about some tips on how to save money in your marriage. Stay tuned.
You don't want to miss it. You're listening to Marriage Mania, where we are audacious, sagacious, and tenacious for the Lord to uphold godly marriages and to raise fervent children who are countercultural and stand for biblical truth.
Welcome back. I'm Tanya.
And I'm Michael.
And today we're going to talk about tips on how to save money in your marriage. We have to save the money. I mean, it's all about the money, right? We need money in order to survive. We need money for the future. God wants us to be good stewards of our money and to save. And so how are we going to do this? And if you've been following along, we've been doing a series on finances. So let's jump right on in on how do we save money in our marriage?
Yeah.
And in general, and how do we teach that to our kids? How do we do all that?
Yeah, so important, so crucial to healthy finances, which is crucial to a healthy marriage because it's one of the number one things that couples argue about. Mm-hmm. One of the leading causes of divorce is bad finances, unhealthy finances. So much in the Bible, God talks about how to have healthy finances, so that we're not bogged down in unhealthy finances and can't do anything for the kingdom. We want to have a kingdom mindset. So all our finances is directing towards building God's kingdom, and we can have that strong base, that strong marriage with strong finances. And so we're talking about that, and we're having a series to talk about finances from a marriage perspective, since finances can be that major source of stress on the marriage and a leading cause of divorce. If our finances are unhealthy, our marriages tend to be unhealthy. Mm-hmm. But God does want our finances to be healthy and unified. And we want you to check out our other episodes in our series on such topics as having that kingdom mindset with our finances, tithing, having a solid Christian financial advisor, being one in our finances with our spouse, with agreed upon budget, having joint bank accounts, balancing your checkbook, keeping track of your spending in a tracker to see if you're making budget, avoiding debt, saving for purchases instead of financing them. As spouses, we need to be on the same page with these things. And this page needs to be a healthy page, God's page.
Yeah, we need to be saving that money, like you were saying. I mean, because you never know when something could break, or when you're trying to buy something, a new car or whatever it is, saving for the future for your children, marriage, future marriages, things like that.
Yeah, we need to be on the same page with all this, of one mind. We can't be going in opposite directions.
I'm going to save for myself.
Right.
And you're going to save for yourself. No, my money is your money is my money. And so we need to make sure that everything is unified and we're, like you said, on the same page with everything.
Yeah, our financial wagons are hitched together, whether we like it or not. By nature of being married, if I make bad financial decisions, then it affects you. And that's why we argue about it. We need to be on the same page. And like I said before, that page needs to be God's page. That can be very unifying. We're all going in the same page, same direction, because we're all operating under the same playbook, the Bible, God's word. And God has a lot to say about our finances. And we're talking today about being on the same page with saving. That is just a huge part of having healthy finances, is to have that cushion, saving our finances.
Yeah, growing up, I didn't even know a lot about savings. I mean, because it was just you get money and you spend it. And I really didn't think about the future. I didn't think about those things. And so I'm really thankful that you manage our money and that we have really come to an agreement at the very beginning of our marriage and who's going to manage the money. And we've talked about this in different podcasts where we have a monthly budget meeting where we talk about what has been spent and also what we have in our savings and how we are planning for the future with that.
Having those monthly meetings or whatever can really help to make sure we're on the same page. We're talking about our finances and nothing's in secret, and we can have an agreement on the direction that we're going and how much we're allocating and spending on certain things with the budget and how much we're saving. And, a big part, we wanted to talk about how we can save, especially if we're not saving. How do we go about doing that? A big part of healthy finances is living well within our means, whatever our means are, big or small, living within those means so that we can save for when, not if, but when something big breaks, the washer, the dryer, the HVAC, the roof, or when we're out of work with no income for 6 months. Do you have savings to cover this? Can you live 6 months on your savings? We know a little bit about this, right?
Yes.
Being out of work and our HVAC breaking?
Yeah, I mean, we have some experience, and we can go back to like 2015, where we actually had no jobs at that time because of layoffs, and that was very difficult. But God saw us through, and we saved enough money to be able to make it through for close to 2 years. And we're kind of in that same situation again, just recently over the last couple years, going into ministry, and those things can be a walk of faith, and you just kind of trust the Lord.
Yeah, going into
And
ministry or starting your own business. A lot of
yeah,
times you've got to
business.
live on your own savings while
Yeah.
you're getting things going because there's no income
And
coming,
you just got to
coming in.
trust. You got to trust the Lord and surrender that. But it's the planning of saving for that future endeavor or whatever is happening, like you were saying, repairing something that went out in your house, or you get laid off and you have to be able to survive for at least 6 months. And I think that's the general rule, 6 months. But if you can plan to be okay to look for a job for a year, because sometimes it may take a year to find an actual job. But if you have that savings, then you don't have to worry too much so on the finances, the day to day things like your groceries, your mortgage payment, your bills that you have. And especially if you listen to the previous podcast where we talked about debt, getting out of debt is so important so that if you are in the situation, you're not struggling because you're just paying the things that are necessary, the necessities of life versus added debt on top of that.
Right. And saving is very important. So when you have money coming in, you're not spending all of it. You're putting some away. So when you don't have any money coming in, you can live on what you saved. Or when things break unexpectedly. I say unexpectedly because we should expect things to break unexpectedly.
Yeah,
like we just had an HVAC that broke out of the blue, and now we got to pay for getting that.
And it's super
repaired.
cold right now. So it's just something that, happens, and now we have to fix it. And, we had to plan for that to make sure that we have that to be able to fix that as we're going into the winter months.
Yeah, or saving for retirement in the future when income will be less. So you want to save for that so you don't struggle during your retirement years, and saving for education for your kids because that's going to come up. And if you haven't saved for that, then you go into debt because of that, or your kids go into debt. And, if we don't save for these huge things when they happen, they're going to severely stress out your finances, right? Which in turn will severely stress out the marriage. It's hard for a lot of people to handle stress. It doesn't bring out the best. All of us stress doesn't oftentimes bring out the best in us, and financial stress especially can really do that. And so if we can have healthy finances, then that can help keep a lot of that stress away, which then won't stress out the marriage. And that's why God tells us to save in Proverbs 6-8, God says, do what the ant does. Look at the ant. Uses that as an analogy. The ant who saves during the summer months so that it has plenty during the winter months. And God told Joseph to store up grain during 7 years of plenty so that Egypt could provide for everyone in the area during the 7 years of famine. And that was in Genesis 41. The Bible doesn't specify the exact amount you should save, but Christian financial experts say that in today's economy and doing what your finances need to do, we need to be at least saving 15% of our gross income, going right off the top, like taxes and your tithe. Taxes, tithe, and savings should come off the top. Money comes out of your paycheck for taxes first, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
But so should our tithes and savings. As far as tithe, we talked about in another podcast how God wants our first fruits. So we should pay our tithe first, not wait to see if there's something left over. It's the first thing as a thanking God for the blessings that he gave, what he brought in. We thank him with that 10% right off the top of our gross income. Tithe by definition is 10%. And then a great practice is to have 15% come right out of your paycheck for saving directly into emergency saving accounts until you have 6 months of emergency savings that you could live on for 6 months without a job and can cover things that break that need to be replaced. And then after your emergency savings is built up, then that 15% goes into investments and retirement accounts. First retirement accounts, And then once you're saving enough for that, then you can look for other investments that you could invest in. But the idea is don't even consider this 15% as part of your take home income. And I think the best way to really be able to do that is to start off doing that from the very beginning. So I think it's very important that we teach our children to do this with any allowances or any money they earn as a child, so that they hopefully set the precedent with their first adult job to start doing the same. This is the way I was brought up. Oh, right off the top, I just 10% goes to the church, 15% goes right into savings. The way I've done it my whole life, what my parents taught me. So as soon as I get my first job, that's the first thing I do. 10% goes to tithe. 15% even comes out like taxes, direct deposit, right? And I don't even treat it as income. It doesn't even look like income. And I'm not even living off of. So I'm learning to live off the other 85% of my income, or 75% after you do tithing and saving. And we're doing this with our daughter, right?
Yeah, we are. And, just to bring a different point, I was listening to a sermon this morning, actually, and it talked about the man who, I think his name is J.C. Penney. He actually discovered the J.C. Penney store. He lived off 10%. So he had all of this income coming in 100%. He gave 90% to pastors and ministries that would go out and get the gospel spread. And he would live on 10%. And the pastor was basically talking about, normally we live off 90% and we give 10%, but JCPenney lived off 10% and gave 90%. I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive, because he knew probably how to invest his money. He was not living above his means, and he was able to live off that 10% of the income that he was bringing in. So I think living small is a key here, because we're able to give and do those things like J.C. Penney mentioned. And I know that was kind of just like a little bonus tip here that I heard this morning. It kind of fits in to what we're talking about. But going back to your question, where we're talking about our children and how do we teach our children, those are great examples like J.C. Penney, but also the examples of what you do every week. On Sundays, you basically bring 3 jars out, and the jars are basically one's for saving, one's for spending, and one's for
tithe.
Yeah. And so those 3, and then our daughter just distributes all the money between the 3 containers. And I know that she's super excited. She's getting older, so we're looking at doing checking accounts for her. But that has been something that she's been doing since she was, 3.5, maybe 4 years old, where we give her $1 and change, and then she gets to actually physically put that money in each of the jars, the little containers that we have for her.
And it's her own money, which I think is very important, because she's already, you can learn finances even at her level when she was like 3 or whatever, where she's doing very little things.
It's the tangible, right?
That she's capable of doing. And we would pay her for certain chores. We'd always emphasize there's chores that you do for the family because you're part of the family, but there's some chores that you do for pay, because we want to teach you how to earn your own money and how to practice saving and tithing your own money. And so we would lead her in that process, and we'd use actual cash that's visible. It needs to be visible cash and coins that she would then put a dime. She would give her $1. So she put a dime in the container that would go to tithe for the church. And she would put another dime or 15 cents into her savings jar that she's still building up savings. And when she would earn income for gifts from during Christmas or birthdays, or as she got a little older, she starts doing some things like doing nails and things like that for people, painting nails, and she would earn a little income, a little entrepreneurial spirit there, and we would lead her into saving the 15% and tithing the 10%. So she's already getting used to that. And so as that becomes ingrained over 18 to 20 years, I mean, that should really set a precedent as we're leading her to do that. So then when she gets her own job, hopefully she'll continue to do that, where she'll tithe right off the top, 10% to the church, and 15% will come right out of her paycheck and go right into emergency savings until that's built up. And once that's built up, then that 15% goes directly out right into retirement accounts to save for her retirement. And that's what we're teaching her to do. And I think it's important to lead our children into like a Dave Ramsey course, that gives a very strong Christian lessons on how to handle finances. And let's actually walk our children through those Dave Ramsey course, which a lot of it should sound familiar if we're already going through those steps of teaching them how to save. Like, oh wow, that's what Dave Ramsey is talking about. I remember my parents doing that and talking about it.
It was so cute too, because we talked about it in our tithing podcast, but I just have to bring it back up. She would put 10 cents in an envelope and we would get her to tithe on that 10 cent. And just, it's amazing because you may think 10 cents is nothing, but then you can go back to the widow's mite in the Bible, and she gave all that she had, and it was so honored by God. And I could just see like the Lord just smiling down as she's giving 10 cents of her $1 a week. So I just think it's a beautiful teaching, and it's biblical.
So so it's great if we can start off on the right foot and we teach our children to save 15% and to tithe. So then when you go into a career, you're already doing that and you're already used to just living off the rest of it after you've tithed and after you've saved 15% and after taxes come out. Now we're living off the rest, and we stay used to that. But if you don't start that, then you're automatically going to start living to the edge of your income usually. And then it becomes hard to save, to like, oh wow, we're living paycheck to paycheck. We don't have any savings and we don't have any margin. So how do we save? So what do we do then? If we're in that circumstance, we're now taking a Dave Ramsey course, and Dave Ramsey goes, you need to have an emergency savings. You need to get at least $1,000 in emergency savings really quickly to cover when HVAC breaks or something. And then from there, start working on getting that 6 months worth of emergency savings, so you can live off of your emergency savings for 6 months if you got sick and lost a job or something. And so you've taken a Dave Ramsey course and you're like, oh wow, well, but how do we even begin? How do we even, like, we're living to the margin, to the edge of our savings. What do we do? How do we start? How do we just all of a sudden just start saving 15%? We can't even make ends meet on 100%, and we can't save anything. Where do we start? How do we do that?
Well, that's a great question. And I think one of the things is really looking at what you're paying on a monthly basis and what can you cut out, and not cut out to spend that money, but cut out to actually start saving that money. Maybe you have some old memberships that you're just not going to, like a YMCA or a gym membership that you're just not using. Why not just cut that out? And if it's $100 a month that you're paying on that, take that $100 immediately. Don't even spend it, but actually put that money, like you're still paying the YMCA, and put it right into your savings account. There you go. You've got, $100 that you're building up. You've got 900 to go, but also looking at like cable or the things that you are doing on a monthly basis. Are you going to get coffee out at Starbucks every single week? Are you spending like $50 on coffee? Like, why don't you get coffee from the grocery store and make it at home? Like, there's a lot of things that you can do to help you save money. I know we did that. We actually looked at some of our bills years ago. So we were able to do that. We were able to look through some of the monthly finances that we're spending and then use that to save for our daughter's future. Like, actually invest in that. So I think it's really important to evaluate. I think we need to do another evaluation. Maybe it's every other year, maybe it's every 3 years, but just looking at everything, looking at your cell phones and seeing what you're paying, because you never know. If you've been with a cell phone company for so long, they might say, oh, you're just a great customer. We'll give you a discount, and your payments may go down. You just never know. You need to try to check with all of your providers that you're using to help your house flow, and your mobile and your cable and all of these things, so that you can start getting yourself in a place where you could save that $1,000 in a year. And I think you could do it pretty fast if you start looking at those bills monthly.
Oh man, that's a great point. We were saving, but we had our every dollar allocated when our daughter was born, and we're like, well, now that she's born, we need to to start saving for education like right away, so we can get the compound interest working right away. But we got every dollar going somewhere. What do we do? And yeah, I think you had the idea. Well, I don't just call around to everybody that we have providers for, internet, TV, whatever, and just ask, hey, what can you do? How can we do this cheaper? It's amazing. We didn't even really cut back any services. They did for the same service that we had. It's like, yeah, we got this special going on. We can give this deal. They're not going to be assertive in coming to you for these deals, but if you call them, it's amazing how they just happen to have these deals in place. And I think it was like $300 a month that we saved. And we were like, everything we saved, we were like, that's what we're going to put into our education
we didn't
fund.
touch it. Yeah.
And
we didn't
so
touch it.
it was like, and so it was fun. Just like, oh, wow, we just saved $50 here on this service. Oh, we just saved $25 on this service. Oh, we just got cheaper insurance. We saved $100 here in insurance, and it added up to like $300 that we were able to put monthly into her savings. Which, when you add that up, if you didn't have any interest, that's like what, $60,000 by the time she would have for school, and that's without accruing interest. So it'd probably be at least twice or three times that. It could be $180,000, $200,000, $300,000 just from calling around to pay less for the services that we already were paying for. And so those are the kind of things that you can do to try to find savings. Or like you were saying, coffee. Maybe I'll cut out coffee. Maybe I just examine what we're spending on. Sometimes we eat out a lot. It's like, man, I spend a lot of money eating out. What if I just didn't eat out that much and use that money and put it into savings?
Yeah. I mean, just for example, we don't eat out hardly at all. We basically cook everything because it's healthier. But when we do go out, it is a treat for us. It's special, and we enjoy it more so than what we used to do before at the beginning of our marriage, where we would go out to eat, and that's just a lot of money being spent. But, the groceries are so expensive. It's hard to save money on that because they make it so hard. You have to like have all these coupons and then kind of get the coupons according to the dates. And it's just so much work. And just to eat healthily it's a lot of work, and it costs a lot of money, but it's better to invest in our health instead of, eating out and spending all that money. But I just think, going back to everything, just really looking at what we have on a monthly basis. I know that our gym membership is going to be up soon, and so we're going to take that and allocate that as savings, because
just exercise on our own.
Yeah, we exercise at home, we run and do all those things, but we were using it because they had an amazing pool, and I'm just so sad they got rid of the pool. And we're like, okay, well, we can exercise on our own, let's save our money. And so we're really excited about that, because that's just going to be a little bit of extra money that we can put in a savings account and save that, because we're already used to paying it out. So when you're used to paying something out, then don't get used to getting that money back. Get used to putting that straight into another account.
Right. Or paying off debt, when we talked about before,
Yes.
when we need to get out of debt as well. But if we got that under control, and we're talking about savings, and that's what can go directly into savings. And, and quite frankly, sometimes we may need to live a little smaller than what we're living. If we're buying we got too big of a house, we got too big of a car for our income, and it's swallowing up all our finances, so we can't save. I know when I started out as a police officer, I was making poverty level income. Police officers make nothing, especially when they start out. And, at that point, I didn't try to live in a middle class neighborhood. I lived in the projects, government subsidized housing with $100 rent. And I worked overtime so that I could do what I needed my finances to do. And, and sometimes we need to do those things. And sometimes we need to take on maybe work overtime or take on a part-time job. I know I was amazed to find out how many police officers, first of all, everybody worked overtime. They either worked overtime or they had another job on the side. And a lot of times the other job on the side was they own their own business. I was so astounded at how many police officers own their own business. Somebody be doing something on their own laptop or whatever, and just to shoot the breeze, I'd come by and I say, hey, man, what's up? What are you doing? It's like, I'm doing payroll. I'm like, doing payroll? What does that mean? What? And he's like, I got a store. It's like, you got a store? You work as a police officer. I know, but I got a store too. And there was so many police officers. There was one guy that owned a grocery store. There was another guy that owned a baseball novelty shop, like with baseball cards and other novelties that he sold, and they had that running on the side. And that's what sometimes you need to do when our primary job is not bringing in enough income. We got to look for those side hustles kind of things, or, things that we can do at home, that we can do on the side and earn a little more income. And even if that means putting some in savings. I know when I was working overtime as a police officer, I one time looked back and said, I'm working overtime solely to put stuff in savings. That's the amount that I was putting into savings was what I was working in overtime. And I was like, sometimes I was thinking, man, I could like have a little bit more rest if I didn't put into savings. But I was like, no, I got to put into savings. I was determined to follow the rules. I'm going to put 15% into savings. But I do think it's important that we do that in such a way that also balances family life, because we still need to invest in our family and their emotional well-being. We can't just be working all the time and not spend any time with our family. So we do have to balance that. We need to find some kind of things that, like having a store that can operate on its own, and maybe we just kind of oversee it on the side, or something we can do online where we're still spending time with our family and our family's not suffering for all that work too. A couple quick other things I wanted to talk about in regards to emergency savings is we want to make sure that that's completely accessible without penalty or being tied to the ups and downs of the market. So that's one of those things where it's like in a savings account, there's some high yield savings accounts out there online that you can get to that are perfectly trustworthy, that you can get right now. It's like 5%. So instead of putting it into a savings account that's earning, like with the banks, usually don't give your brick and mortar banks hardly give any interest anymore. So there's other ways to get more interest, so you don't have a significant amount of savings sitting in a no interest account. So it's serving something, but you can get it out without penalty, and it's not tied to the market. So it's like, oh, the market's way down, I don't want to take anything out right now. So that's what you want emergency savings to be, really accessible. And the 6 months of emergency savings, keep in mind that doesn't mean you sit there and go, well, we're living on $6,000 a month, so then 6 months I need to have $36,000 in emergency savings. Well, when you're out of work, you are going to live very small. So you can live on less than $6,000. So look at like the bare minimum that you would have to live on if you had to give up, like just canceling TV or things like that in order to live really small. The smallest you can live to at least have that. So maybe you can live off of $3,000 a month. So maybe your emergency savings could be $18,000, but you want to have that emergency savings to where you can live for 6 months, being able to calculate that, and over calculate it, if anything, to just be on the safe side. Yeah, we definitely could live off of that for 6 months and be okay. And 6 months of living expenses should definitely be able to cover a HVAC that broke down, a roof that needs to be replaced, all these, a car that broke down. Now we need to get a new car, or if we got to fix the car and it's a huge repair. Those things can really stress out your marriage if you don't have an account that you can just go to. No worries, we got it right there, and we can fill that emergency fund back up to replace it for the next emergency that will happen. I love what Dave Ramsey says. He's like, just plan on rain. It's gonna rain. Yeah, and you need to be prepared for rain. And in your life, there's going to be a little rain. When you have good times, we need to save a portion of that away so we can save for the hard times when those unexpected emergencies come up that we should expect to come up from time to time, and we're ready for it. And that we can live off our savings for 6 months, and we can cover the HVAC and the car that breaks when it happens. That's what our emergency savings is for. And once we have that, then we move on to saving for retirement and the other things that we need to save on, which we'll talk about in another podcast.
Yeah, I think this is great, at least to get us in that mindset of saving our money, because ultimately our money belongs to the Lord, but we want to save so that we can prepare for the things that happen, like you talked about, where it could be an emergency situation or something breaks in the home, and we want to be able to have that. You don't want to put that on a credit card and cause more debt. You want to be in a place where you can use your savings for those rainy days. Follow along in the finance series, give us a thumbs up, and until next time,
God bless.